And we're proud of our 100% record of successful client implementations. By sharing our investment in innovation, development and regulatory initiatives, we unlock more value for our community. We enable our clients to grow their business and increase efficiency and speed. Our clients have used our solutions to simplify their administrative burden, increasing revenue per relationship manager by up to 10%. Through automation, we have delivered STP rates for payments of up to 99.8% for our clients. And our flexible and modular architecture allows clients to expand rapidly into new markets. We offer a range of innovative solutions from front to back office. And we also support the back office with banking operations. Avaloq's open, highly scalable architecture is built on a unified data model, providing a single source of truth for all client and transaction data. With our multi-entity, single-instance approach and market-specific standard editions, clients can easily expand their business. Our products integrate seamlessly with our clients' own applications or third parties, and our customization layers give clients flexibility while maintaining many of the benefits of standardization. Everything we do supports our mission to orchestrate the financial ecosystem and democratize access to wealth management.
This is the big picture. Digital transformation is a complex journey. What we need is to connect business strategies and innovation. Transform the process to deliver fast. Collaborate with experts in building your vision from concept to launch. Deliver the best experiences, from ensuring reliability to embedding quality in your culture. Take your business to the cloud, to grow and scale on demand, enabling you to thrive. Unlock your full potential using data-driven decisions to form real-time strategies. Deliver faster and more efficiently using AI-powered solutions. Possibilities are endless. Let's navigate this complex journey together by allowing us to speed up your transformation.
Go. Hi there, I'm Jonathan De Luzuriaga. In today's highly competitive digital landscape, tech professionals are under pressure to rapidly develop and deploy innovative products. That's why Globe Business API Solutions help businesses like Spring Valley streamline processes and automate workflows for enhanced efficiency. They seamlessly integrate with existing systems, eliminating the need to build everything from scratch and allowing developers to focus on the core functionality of their products. Globe Business API Solutions empower your business to maintain a competitive edge and stay ahead of the industry trends para abot mo ang tuloy-tuloy na success. Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Luzuriaga. As workloads and demands change in today's fast-paced business landscape, scaling infrastructure and resources accordingly can be challenging. But with Globe Business Cloud Solutions, businesses like Spring Valley can easily host websites and build more apps in the cloud while only paying for the services they actually use. It also scales up alongside your business, allowing for seamless growth. Globe Business Cloud Solutions revolutionize the future of work, ensuring operational stability, agility, and resiliency. Para abot mo ang tuloy-tuloy na success.
One business takes on many challenges. But when they're beyond what one can solve, it'll take more. Each one pitching in to form seamlessly linked solutions. And with a partner to innovate and collaborate, we can create better experiences than we ever could alone, to become more valued than we'd ever be on our own. Because there's nothing greater than working as one to make an impact in people's lives. Redefine our greatness. Globe Business.
welcome to Avaloq, the #1 provider of software and services for wealth managers and private banks. Founded in 1985, we now have over 4 trillion in Swiss francs assets managed on our systems, 17 offices, in 10 countries, with more than 2,500 employees across the globe, and 25% of annual revenue spent on R&D. We build long-lasting relationships with our client community. And we're proud of our 100% record of successful client implementations. By sharing our investment in innovation, development and regulatory initiatives, we unlock more value for our community. We enable our clients to grow their business and increase efficiency and speed. Our clients have used our solutions to simplify their administrative burden, increasing revenue per relationship manager by up to 10%. Through automation, we have delivered STP rates for payments of up to 99.8% for our clients. And our flexible and modular architecture allows clients to expand rapidly into new markets. We offer a range of innovative solutions from front to back office. And we also support the back office with banking operations. Avaloq's open, highly scalable architecture is built on a unified data model, providing a single source of truth for all client and transaction data. With our multi-entity, single-instance approach and market-specific standard editions, clients can easily expand their business. Our products integrate seamlessly with our clients' own applications or third parties, and our customization layers give clients flexibility while maintaining many of the benefits of standardization. Everything we do supports our mission to orchestrate the financial ecosystem and democratize access to wealth management.
now, welcome to this session.
Our next session explores applying design thinking and creative problem solving to understand user needs, find opportunities to provide value, and stay relevant in the testing sphere. Our speaker has 14 years of experience in testing and software development. He is a QA team lead at Cambridge University Press and Assessment and co-moderator of the Ministry of Testing PH community. He also writes science fiction and fantasy stories. He'll explore how design thinking can create value beyond testing. Let's give it up for Mr. Richmond Camaro.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone has eaten their lunch, filled in, and ready for this afternoon session. So today we're going to talk about value. But I'm curious, when you hear of the word value, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? I'd like to see it in the chat, please. So value, what's that first thing that comes into your mind? It can be an object, something not seen, anything. So we have importance, we have money, of course, that is valuable. Worth, I like that word, worth. The essence of something, going something deep. Importance or relevance, growth. All right, thank you for your answers. Please hold that in your head as we go through the talk today. But did you know that a paper can also be valuable? I didn't know that a lot can be made with a piece of paper. 5 years ago, I was someone new in my current team, and I was tasked by my manager to measure our metrics and test automation. Okay, I said, I'm familiar with numbers, I'm familiar with tracking things. I can do that. You could also say that coming from someone new, I also have something to prove. So I took my time, I did my research, digging through old files. I scheduled meetings with people that I'd like to meet. Then 2 weeks passed by. My manager came up to me and asked me about what I came up with. I had nothing to show. Oops. Well, I showed my plans. I showed the meetings that I had. I showed the details I gathered. It still is something, right? My manager asked for a piece of paper, and I took an old printout from my drawer. In the back, he started drawing tables, numbers, percentages, and he asked me whether I'm familiar with design thinking. He suggested that I start with paper prototypes. That's why he showed me um, what is written. He said that paper prototypes can facilitate early feedback. He left me with that piece of paper, maybe more ashamed than enlightened, but I'm enlightened nonetheless. And now, 5 years later, I'm here to talk about design thinking. Hi, I'm Richmond. I wish I could say I'm from Hogwarts, but alas, I don't have my invitation letter yet. I'm currently a QA team lead at Cambridge University Press and Assessment. I've taken up Foundations in Design Thinking certification from IDOU. Currently, I'm taking up Masters in Information Technology in De La Salle University. And as I mentioned in the introduction, I also write stories about fantastic places and poems that break your heart. But before I tell you where my design thinking journey has taken me, we start with the most important thing. We start it with what's our why. I can go about my talk telling about value, how we can go about it. how we can bring this to the users and the things that we work for. But let me tell you, starting from now, that going there, giving the value is not a straightforward path. That's why we have to understand why we're doing it in the first place. You can see it in perhaps three areas. We'll talk about the why in the QA space, the why in the team, and also the why in us as individuals. Let's start with the QA first, QA space first. So what can be our why in the QA space? The landscape of testing is changing. What do I mean by that? So imagine this is the landscape of testing. So in the left side is the things that we normally do as QA testers. We do test case creation, execution, documentation, debugging. And as part of our roles, we have to communicate as well, critical thinking to extract more scenarios, and decision making to decide if something is worth releasing. But wait, here comes the change. We started with test automation because we want to deliver things faster. We want to lessen the time to production, and we want to be more efficient. So most of our work has shifted to being owned by the test automation that we created in AI. But there's also a space, a potential that we can fill in. So in terms of the QA landscape, this is an opportunity for us to create value. Of course, it doesn't stop there. What we get from the QA landscape will be transferred to our team. That's why we also have to understand the why in our team. Perhaps it's just something that we want to improve. Or we can go deeper. What identity do we want to craft as a team? And ultimately, it goes to our own why. And this means you as a person and not as the role you assume. Because usually we say, what's our why? And then we answer, as a QA team lead, this is my why. I want to improve the process. But let's go deeper than that. As a person, without your role, why is it important for you to create value? So these three things are the motivation part. We also asked, why design thinking? We can do, go about giving value doing other things, using other framework, but why design thinking? I have four reasons to share with you. It focuses on the user's needs. So design thinking is designed so that our focus, the solution that we will create, is towards the user's needs. We start with understanding what they really need through some processes that I'll talk about later. Second, design thinking is structured and at the same time flexible. Often we often go to perhaps shotgun solutions, or we go towards the solution first. But design thinking offers a structure that we can follow, and at the same time allowing us the flexibility to adjust depending on the data and feedback that we gather. Which leads me to the third point. It encourages feedback and iteration because we wanted to have feedback early on, not when the solution is done. We want to have feedback while we're still doing the value that we want to create. And lastly, it's a skill to learn in itself. So this can be added to the value that you can create as an individual because you've learned something new. You learn how to use design thinking in the creative problem solving. So that's our whys. We have our whys in the QA space, whys in the team, why as an individual, and also why in our process. So in pure design thinking fashion, let's start. How might we create value for QA with the help of design thinking? Let's be a little meta, right? Design thinking starts with, as I mentioned, empathizing. Who here has seen Inside Out? I haven't seen the second one yet, but I'm sure there's an alternate universe where empathy is one of the emotions, right? You can argue that. So we often hear empathy related to emotion. So why is it here? Why is it in design thinking? Because if you think about it, if you think about our users, most of their actions and decisions are backed by emotions. Just think about your recent purchase. Why did you recently buy that thing? It's not because perhaps you thought about it, perhaps you analyzed it, but the motivation is most emotional, right? Because you want that thing. Same goes with understanding what the user wants. The user wouldn't say, I don't like this. I don't like this website. It's too buggy or too there's code that I cannot understand. The user only says it's slow. I don't like waiting. So it's the reaction of our users are also emotional. That's why we start with identifying the pain points. It can be questions around what takes too long, or maybe there's something that we're doing again and again. Perhaps we want to do something earlier in the process and shifting left. So these are some of the questions that we want to ask. Our users can be ourselves because it might be something that we're improving for ourselves. Our users might be coming from other stakeholders. But these are good starting point when we want to ask what are the pain points. We can also conduct value stream mapping where we go with the different parts of the process. So in this example, we go through the different stages, different ceremonies that we've taken up, and then we decide which part of these processes can be improved, which of these has the potential to yield more value. And of course, we can reach out to our target users. As I will show you before, we have tried interviewing some of our users, some of the those that we consider users, and actually got data from that, both qualitative and quantitative. There are other methods as well on how we can reach users, but the important thing is if we want to understand, to actually empathize our users, we have to put ourselves in their shoes. We have to understand where they're coming from, because it might be the case that what we see is not what they actually feel, and we have to validate that early on at this stage. That's why we want to reach out to them directly. In the next area is define. So we've gathered the pain points. Now we look at this and define what our problem is. We can start with asking which of the pain points has the potential to be beneficial when addressed. And at this stage, I'm sure, coming from the data that we gathered, there might be a lot, right? There might be too much that we want to address at the same time. That's why it's okay that it's a hypothesis at this point, because eventually we'll decide on which area we're going to focus. So how do we define the problem? As how we've started, usually in the design thinking framework, it suggests to use the format how might we, because it suggests a solution is possible, because it's asking a question, and that a tendency for us is when a question is asked, we want to answer that, right? And also it's broad enough that we can answer it in different ways and provide different options as well. So in our use case, I'm going to use some examples that we've tried, but know that I'm highlighting more how we do it than what we do. So in this case, I'm going to introduce two areas around metrics and exploratory testing that our team has experienced. For the metrics part, our how might we statement is how might we create a representation of our project metrics and share it with others. For the exploratory testing part, how might we create more test scenarios to improve our testing? So we identified some pain points. We now have at least a starting definition of what the problem is. So our next thing that we have to do is to ideate with solutions. This is where we start actually thinking about the things that we want to do. So when ideating, we go with quantity first. It, it's possible that there are a lot of suggestions, It might be not feasible at that time, but while we were starting to ideate, we want to encourage both the brilliant and the ridiculous. So we're not yet in the point of analysis. We want those ideas to propagate, right? That's why we go with quantity. We go with what seemingly impossible at the start, because later on, we're still going to test that idea. At this stage, it's also okay to build on the ideas of others. So there's marrying of ideas. So you have this idea, you have another idea. Sometimes when you put them together, it's not 1 plus 1 equals 2. Sometimes it's 1 plus 1 equals 8, right? So a lot of opportunities when combining those ideas. So we actually did that. We actually start ideating on what we can do around this based on the definition of our problem. So once we have the idea, we select what is feasible, and we start to think about what we can prototype and test as well. As I've told you in my initial story of the paper prototype, so we build in order to think. Sometimes we have to see it. We have to hold it in our hands for us to imagine what our proposed solution is. So in usual cases, we want to build because we want to solve already. We want to understand the solution. But in this case, we shift that mindset that you want to build in order to think. That's why in the second bullet, it's also important to have strong opinions and weekly health. Because at this point, the thing that you're building might be thrown away because it's a paper prototype, because it's not feasible, because it's not the solution that we wanted. That's why it should be weekly held, even though we're doing it out of passion, out of our strong opinion to deliver value. That's why we start with paper, with something throwable, because it's not yet the final solution that we're going to do. And at this point as well, we can also build on the ideas of others as we're looking on different types of prototypes. We can combine them and do the solution that we're looking for. So in the next few slides, I'm going to show you the prototyping and testing that went through on both of those cases. And as I mentioned, I like you to focus on the how, not the what. Okay. So we start with the metrics part of the things. So there was a time when we actually built our own dashboard. All right. So uh, this is a dashboard that we built. But to remind you, we are QAs, right? We are QA testers. But during that time, we learned how to code. We learned um, how to deploy as a team, and we created this dashboard. And then our next iteration, so we have that, but I think it's not capturing the ideas that we want. We wanted to have action items from those metrics. So we try different tools and integrations for visibility. This one in particular is integration between Power BI and Slack. So once in a while, we'll send these metrics, and this would spur action items when once it delivers in the Slack. So we did that. Then a few months or years later, we went back to the drawing board. We asked ourselves, are we delivering the type of metrics that the users want? So we went back to understanding how do we actually use these metrics. We start thinking about, can these metrics be used prescriptively, predictively, descriptively? So we went back to the drawing board. You could say this is part of the iteration and testing, because yes, we have metrics that we're displaying, we have metrics that we're sharing, but it's not hitting the solution that we want. We're not getting some value out of it because it's not spraying the actual items that we wanted to have. So we went back to the drawing board and tried to understand how can we actually use these metrics. So at present, we're also looking into um, utilizing Power BI and use of generative AI as well to help us deliver insights. So looking at the um, other side on how we prototype and test for exploratory scenarios. So just a story. So we are QAs, we are testers, but what we wanted to do in this part is we wanted to strengthen how we test. So if in other things there are you can refer to um, techniques easily, we want also this to have to we want to do this also in terms of testing. So when I say, oh, do boundary value testing or use some none all technique. So it's like calling out your magic powers, right? And we wanted to do something similar with exploratory testing. We wanted to be smarter, to be more structured. That's why we wanted to understand what we can do in exploratory testing. So we start with learning. One of the um, resources that we found helpful was this book. I would recommend this book. Um, this is regarding exploratory testing. It's written by Elizabeth Hendrickson. So Elizabeth Hendrickson is one of the um, well-known QA leaders in globally. That's why we use this book to start to understand what can we do, or what don't we know about exploratory testing. So again, we iterated. We had different activities on actually understanding the knowledge of what exploratory testing is. We even experimented in different learning forms, having amazing races to actually explore and combine that with learning exploratory techniques. There are also widely available tools that looks promising and supports our desire to create value. So this is mostly a test session tool combined with uh, documentation. So it's a time tool. When you start the session, you type the scenarios that you're doing and document your test session. The one below is regarding is risk storming, and it's about understanding the risks, different areas, and opportunities where it's possible to explore. Okay, so these are um, available back then. But then again, we feel it's it has some overlap with what we're trying to do. But there are other things that we want. We wanted to have the techniques embedded in these tools. So were we wore a different hat again. We undertook a development course and created a prototype of the exploratory tool that we want. So these are some examples of the testing techniques: beginning, middle, end, accrued, sum, none, all, or changing the model that we've gathered from studying different resources. So we wanted to have a tool that you can actually choose um, these techniques and use them in the testing session. So this is just a prototype, but we wanted to explore if this can be viable to the team as well, if this can add value in what we test. Now, we're exploring generative AI tools as well that helps us generate exploratory scenarios. So, for example, we're going to give the acceptance criteria, and it will help us generate exploratory scenarios. So, um, from using different tools to studying to trying to create our own, and now to leveraging AI. So that is our path for this um, exploratory scenarios. So combining all that, looking at those examples, did we actually create value? What actually did happen while we're trying different things, while we're iterating, while we're receiving this feedback, um, and even scrapping those initial ideas? What actually happened? You can say that through our experiences, we had the chance to gain these different skills. We were able to do research, apply different research methods. And since it's creating, like, it's managing a different team, we've learned facilitation. We've learned how to code, even though our main role is testing. There's data analysis, learning how to do other roles like being a product owner, scrum master. reaching out to the users through interviews, and also planning. So these are the different hats that we wear. And you could say that it's also exploring different career paths, different value that we can offer, and not just our testing. But of course, it's not a fairy tale story. We have our challenges as well. And this will be three things that I would highlight. And also, I would also like to share how we actually dealt with the challenges that we face. One of the problems that we had is there are multiple point of view from different users, especially for metrics. So there are metrics that we as QAs want to use. There are metrics that other stakeholders want to see. So having those different inputs, how do you actually decide what to do? There's a challenge of creating that one size fits all product, which is impossible to do. We cannot please everybody, right? So what we did is we identify who our ideal users are, and we start with that solution. Of course, we're not going to address all the needs, but there's an ideal user that we have in mind. There's an ideal use case that we want for our solution to address. So we started with that and went with that. So we don't want to capture all and end up with nothing. If we delay creating solution, so how are we going to get feedback? How are we going to iterate? That's why we started with the ideal user. And as mentioned, we started with a selected solution and then continued to iterate after that. So for the next is the adaptation to the actual process. So as I've said earlier when I was discussing why we're going to use design thinking, there's some sort of structure and flexibility. So we're so used to going through the solution immediately that it sometimes feels unnatural to start with understanding what the problem is, right? Sometimes when we um, receive a problem, our first idea is, oh, this is how we're going to fix it. But we didn't ask, is this actually the solution that is needed? That's why the adaptation to the process is quite a bit of a challenge because you have to spend time understanding what the actual problem is. You have to spend time defining the problem is before you start ideating with the solution. But I think the benefit of having that extra time of understanding is more rather than less. So even if we spend more time in that, it gives us a push to our next steps. So without that pain points, without those um, problems that we gathered during the empathizing phase, how are we going to test? How are we going to make sure that what we're doing is creating value? But in the end, going through this change requires learning and unlearning some things. As I mentioned, we have to change that mindset of going to the solution first. We have to start with understanding what the problem is. Because understanding the user needs, the pain points will allow us to create more value. And of course, the enemy of everyone, not just in this process, the time and energy that we have to spend. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, this is on top of what we're doing as QAs, right? This is extra. This is not in our usual roles. So there's always the feeling that we're already doing too much, doing testing, doing automation deployment, discussing with our stakeholders, discussing with our counterparts. And then there's this one, right? So it's on top of what we do. So there's always the challenge of the time and energy not being enough. And this is what I say to that. There are seasons of being too busy and not. So if we decide to undertake this process, if we undertake value, of course there will more time will be spent doing this. More time will be spent creating that solution. But in the end, if we're able to implement that, we're actually lessening the time of doing things. We've since we have this solution already, we have something to improve. We now have space to do the other things that we like, right? So there are seasons where we have to actually sit down, spend greater time and energy to do this in order for our future selves, the future of our users, to feel the value that we want to create. So as I mentioned, we spend time now to be able to spend time later. And finding opportunities is a part of the continuous improvement as well. So what happens now? Now that we did that, the, what I could say is I open at the close, or should I say I close at the open? Because we go back to our why. In the QA space, what value can we create? What value has the potential? We're able to redefine what QA and testing are. QA is not just testing anymore. QA is ensuring the value, whether it be wearing the developer hat, where it be analyzing data, facilitating meetings, interviewing. All of that contributes to ensuring the quality of our deliverables. So we create value more than testing. We're not just testers anymore. We're, we're these different roles that we have. And how about in our team? How about now? Can you hear me? All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for the feedback. So we're actually applying design thinking live, right? So you're actually giving me feedback, and now we're iterating. Okay, so I'm not sure where I was got, but I'll start with my my. I'll just start this just so I can deliver it properly. So what do we create um, value in the QA space? So as I mentioned, we wanted to redefine what QA and testing are. So we're not just testers. We've worn those different hats, and we were able to deliver the value by combining those, right? And next to our team. So our why is what is the identity that we want to create. So once we go through this process, we understand our potential, we understand what we can be as a team. So the identity is just the first level. So if we do one thing several times, like the power of habit, if you do one thing for the next 21 days again and again, it will be inculcated in your habit. And that habit, when you do it again and again, it becomes the team's culture. And this is the value that we can get as a team. So it's not just the metrics of doing something faster. It's redefining what our team culture is. And finally, what is our value as an individual? As I've said, we get to wear different hats. We understand user stories. We were able to prototype solutions, data analysis, and leading the team. If we, as an individual, were able to do that, what else? What more can we do, right? But this is just the start. It's partly having that idea of squiggly careers, or where can ensuring quality extend to. As I mentioned, even though these are different roles, different areas, it's still contributing to the quality that we want to give. And with that, what I leave you as QAs, as testers, is to stay curious. we are QAs after all, or just like what I like to put it, we are question askers. We ask questions in order to test. We ask whether one thing is working or not. We ask, is this enough? We ask, are we going to deploy? In the beginning, we are question askers. And if we keep staying curious, if we ask, what value can we give, we'll be able to find the value that we're meant to create. Thank you so much, and I hope you find value in the things that you do. Okay, let's see if we have questions. Okay, so while we're waiting to put your questions, and we'll get to that to upvote the questions that you want answered, and we'll get to that in a second.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Richmond, for your presentation. So, why don't we show our appreciation to Mr. Richmond by clicking those emojis? So, send your hearts, send your cheers. Thank you so much. So, sir, we have a lot of questions to go over here. So, let me start with the first one. This is from Sheena Diaz. So, the question is, how can QA measure and demonstrate the value it provides beyond just finding bugs?
Okay, so if I answer this, it will take the whole afternoon. No, I'm just kidding. But there's no straight answer to this one. But maybe I can um, share what we do, because if we're talking about the things that we want to measure, so that's the metrics point, right? Because we have to ask, why are we actually measuring them? So we can measure defects, we can measure the throughput that we're delivering, and in automation side, we can measure how quick is, or how quick our automation runs are. We can measure the percentages of false positives. Um, we can measure the maintenance that we have. So there's a lot of what we can measure. So I think it's not a maybe this is an answer, but we go back to the pain points you identified. So perhaps you identify the pain points that um, something is taking too long. So we can use the time to deploy as the measure, for example. So perhaps one of your pain points is regarding your automation being slow. So we can measure the time spent in running those automation during investigation. So it's hard to answer, but maybe my answer is you go back to the problem that you're defining. What are the pain points that you identified, and you do that as a measure. And now, if we're talking, maybe just one more thing. So if we're talking about how we give value in general as a QA, so I think one key element of the design thinking that's not actually in the process, but it's a key into um, a key element in design thinking is the storytelling part. So why am I here? Because there's a value that I want to share. So you package those things, those initiatives that you do, and present it to others. Share the story to others. And I think that is also one way of telling the value that QA has given.
All right, thank you, Sir Richmond. So moving on to our second question. This is from Danica Marie Medrano. So the question is, when do you think the Dev and QA war end? Char daw po.
If only that were easy to answer. Uh, the dev and QA war would end if you decide. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Um, siguro connecting it to the value and to our skills as well. Sagutin ko talaga to. So, connecting to our value and skills. We as QAs team, we're good with communication, right? We're good with communication, and I think um, I'll I'll also pull something in the Agile Manifesto. Communication over documentation, right? So if we follow those rules and guidelines, we want to collaborate. We want to be closer to the developers. We start with the communication because sometimes, for example, if we're just submitting defects, maybe the developer would think, oh, just this is another defect that is found in my code. So there's a tendency to be defensive. But if we communicate that, if we start with communication and collaboration, communication as part of our core skills as QA, collaboration as part of the Agile Manifesto. So this is not, I'm not just inventing this. These are based from some framework. I think we'll start to lessen at least the QA endeavor. I hope.
All right, thank you, Sir Richmond. So moving on to our next question. This is from Armando Junior Durante. So the question is, why do you think design thinking in QA would be valuable with regards to testing, and how can the principles of design thinking be applied to improve the QA process and enhance the overall quality of the product?
Okay. So I think it's most valuable because maybe from the reasons that I gave earlier. The two things that I think are most valuable is one, it helps us actually understand the problem of the user, the pain points, because sometimes we just go to the solution, and the design thinking process allows us to actually sit down, understand what the problem is, so that our solutions are more informed, more targeted to what the user needs are. So that is one thing. And the second thing is the structure and the flexibility. So it has some level of structure. There are some steps that we have to follow, but it's flexible enough to adjust. So relating to your question, to how will that improve the QA process? So since it is flexible enough, you can actually decide which area of the current QA process will you use design thinking with. So you don't have to change the whole QA process, the whole testing process to use design thinking. You can say that, oh, we're just going to apply first in the automation side of things so that the other areas are not disrupted. Because as I mentioned, design thinking is flexible enough to cater to different areas. Maybe just to show how flexible it is. Design thinking is even used in groceries when designing the perfect cart, the push cart. It's even used in that area. So there's no limit on how we can use design thinking because in the first place, its goal is to solve a problem. So design thinking is a creative problem solving framework. So there you go.
All right, thank you for that wonderful answer, Sir Richmond. So moving on to another question from Miss Diane. So the question is, what are the key skill sets required for our team to effectively utilize design thinking in QA?
So key skills. I'll try to give maybe three. So first is to communication. In what way? In specific, to be specific in how we relate to our users, because it's the first thing. It's the first step to empathize with our users. So how are we going to get that from the users? We start with actually communicating with them, understanding what good interviews are, understanding what good questionnaires, how to build good questionnaires, because it's the first entry of the design thinking process. Second is I would say the you have to let go of the perfection mindset because design thinking is an iterative process. So for sure, the first thing that you're going to do is not the perfect solution, because that is the nature of design thinking, that it is an iterative process. So as a skill, you have to understand that what you're doing now might maybe scrape, maybe improve, maybe thrown away. And so there's also maybe the third one is the attachment to the work that you do should be there shouldn't be that, because since we're doing prototypes, there are solutions that will be thrown away by the nature of the process. There are feedback that might feel that will make you feel that you're the one being attacked, but it's actually your work. It's the work that you do. So you, as I mentioned in one of the slides, strong opinions weakly held. Because what we're doing in the long run is we want to create value, right? You want to give the best solution that we can. But design thinking by nature is iterative. There's some things that we can throw away. There's some things that will not meet the final solution. So we have to be resilient in going through that process as well.
All right, thank you, Sir Richmond. So moving on to our next question. This is from Isa Pearl Santos. So the question is, are there specific tools or technologies that can support the implementation of design thinking in QA? How can we leverage these tools to enhance our testing efforts?
Okay. So based from my experience, so far I didn't encounter a specific tool for design thinking. It's actually asking the other way around, like how do we use our current tools to apply design thinking framework. So for example, if we want to, let's just say for tracking, right? If you want to go, um, if you want to just track our progress in the design thinking process, we can actually use the boards that we're currently using, whether it be Jira, Trello, for example. So we can use that to actually have that level or steps. So that's one thing. And for brainstorming, at the minimum, you just need a pen and paper when you're ideating. But there are also online brainstorming tools, Miro, Jamboard before, but it's now deprecated. But there are a lot of brainstorming tools to be used. So I would say I didn't encounter specific tools for design thinking, but I'd like to point out that it's asking with our current tools, how can we reframe or redefine the current tools that we're using to fit the different steps of design thinking. I think that's much more viable solution um, than looking for the tools.
All right, thank you, Sir Richmond. So the next question is from Danica Marie Medrano. So the question is, what characteristics should a QA possess that will help in creative and critical thinking?
Okay, so if there's one thing, I'll go through the to my to the to my last slide when I say stay curious and keep asking questions. So why being curious and why asking questions? So if let's imagine the other way around. Okay, so if let's say you're given a software package to test and you didn't ask questions, you read the acceptance criteria, you look at what it is, but you didn't ask questions. How will you be able to see the other possibilities that are not written in the acceptance criteria in the requirements document if you didn't ask the question? Maybe that's why also there's dev and QA war, because we're questioning things. No, I'm just joking, but um, we started asking questions because there's the benefit of the doubt that what your the requirements document, the acceptance criteria, perhaps might not be encapsulating the truth, the source of truth, of the software package that they want to test. So I think it starts with knowing how to ask the right questions. It's about having the courage as well to ask questions, because if you start to ask questions, that's if you follow that questions, that will lead you to areas where you start to think critically, right? Oh, this is not happening in this page. So why? So it starts with asking question, and it will lead you to creative and critical thinking.
All right, thank you, Sir Richmond. So there you go, Miss Danica. Be brave to ask questions. So the next question is from Rachel Ann Carrillo. So the question is, how can beginners in QA apply design thinking to enhance their testing strategies and achieve better outcomes while adhering to deadlines and managing project timelines?
Okay, so this is uh, a good question. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges is the time, right? It's the time we adhere to deadline. Um, Maybe I can answer this in two parts. So first, as maybe as we do um, in agile way, we time box. Um, we can time box the time we want to spend in design thinking. So there's um, what's this? There's an idea. It's from a book. I think it's called Sprint or Design Sprint by Jake Knapp, if my memory serves me correctly. So, but to illustrate their process of really having that time box. So the design sprint is designed for 5 days. 5 days, just 5 days. And by the end of that, they should have some prototype. So like day one is understanding what the user needs. They go with ideating the day two. But as a maybe you could say an extreme design thinking process, it's um, time box in 5 days to be able to go through have that initial solution that they wanted. So that might be too extreme, um, might not be applicable, but having that time box is helpful as well. And maybe my second suggestion is to um, I think you don't have to do the whole process in one go. So maybe in this quarter or in this month you're too busy. So you start with um, starting the understanding the users first, and maybe next month you can do the next steps. So if so, usually in the project, uh, or at least in the project that I've been with, there's continuous improvement, or at least we include some level of technical debt in our delivery, right? Maybe 10%, maybe 20%. If you need to actually make time, you can say that this is part of the quality technical debt, you could say, and it will be recognized by your team as part of how do we improve the delivery. So if we can cater technical debt, the actual technical debt for our software, for sure, we can also spend maybe 5 to 10% of our deliverable in a sprint towards improving that quality technical debt. So I think that those are two ways to go about it.
All right, thank you, Sir Richmond. So the next question is from Christian Jerick James. So the question is, can you suggest a learning path, resources, and strategies for a QA to fully leverage design thinking while minimizing risk and errors?
Okay, so in my head right now, there are two reliable resources that I can think of. So first, of course, is IDOU. That's where the certifications are in. They're also offering free lessons, if I remember. And there are the people from IDOU. They also have books. I think it's Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly has books that talks about what to do in design. And the other, I think, resource that I can think of is IDX, Interactive Design Foundation. So it teaches also about design thinking. Um, and if you would look at locally, this is not regular, but there are also local providers of design thinking um, training. We had one before from Ateneo. It's a few sessions on about design thinking, and it talks about the foundation. So it's a good starting point as well. So yeah.
All right, so let's go on to our next question. It's also from Isa Pearl Santos. So the question is, what common pitfalls or challenges have you observed in organizations that implemented design thinking in QA? How can we avoid these mistakes?
So I think I can mention one that I've mostly observed, and that is so going through the different phases. empathize, you ideate, you create a prototype. So usually it's in this area where there are common pitfalls that they've created a prototype, a possible solution, and then when they tested that, it failed for some reasons, or it's not the solution that they wanted to, and then they stopped. They stopped. They give up the idea of that solution already. So it breaks the principle of design thinking that it is an iterative solution. Although in one way it might be justifiable that maybe it's not actually the solution, maybe it's not the time. But I think, um, but that's what the common pitfall that I observed, that when one thing stopped working or it's not the solution that we're looking for, the developers or the people involved did not iterate of the solution. Oh, it's not working. Let's stop this one. So I guess we go back to the nature of what the design thinking is. If you look at the definition, it is an iterative creating problem solving process with a focus on iterative. So don't stop. I think if you receive feedback, if you receive hurdles, we have to follow through, because it's the nature of design thinking. If we want to give the solution, we have to go back to the drawing board, if we have to actually go back ideating or even to understanding what the problem is, we have to follow through. So I think it's one of the biggest pitfalls that when 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 the users see that it's not anywhere working, they stop. So in the first place, I would just like to highlight, even if I'm repeating it myself, it is an iterative design process. So yeah.
All right. Thank you, Sir Richmond. So, moving on to our next question. This is from Chris Manalasta. So, the question is, how can we incorporate user feedback into our QA processes to improve product quality?
Okay, so we're talking about the actual product, right? Mm, okay, so maybe to just put it that way, I'm not sure about your experiences, but I think oftentimes the feedback are abstracted, right? Are abstracted to us, so we don't see, or we seldom see the actual users. So maybe the first point I would say, given that, is to ask how do we have, how might we have the access to those feedback? And I think it can be answered different ways, partly technically speaking, and then partly um, maybe just in terms of how we use our skills. On a technical level, so user feedback might mean we have some user behavior tracking, right? So, for example, Google Analytics. So, Google Analytics, we can track how users are behaving. So, in a way, not necessarily feedback, but in a way, we can predict how users are using our product. So that's the technical side of things. And I think, semi-technical, I think now, depending on the nature of your business, I think some products are now incorporating how users can give feedback, like Qualtrics, that comes up in their website, right? So that's one actual way to use how to get feedback. And then finally, if it's really attracted to us, we can get feedback from our product owners, from our business, from our VAs, because if they're the only ones talking to the um, users, uh, there are only source. So those are three sources of feedback. So how do we actually use it? I think one way to use that is maybe mm, maybe two ways. I'll answer in two ways. So first is that will be our input if once we start to do the design thinking process. So we have this different forms of feedback from the technical perspective, from a user perspective. So we ask, what are the pain points in this? How is the user behaving? That does not seem to be the one that imagining. So if we look at Google Analytics, for example, there are some weird behaviors, or this one is using different a weird kind of browser. How will that, is that a pain point to that user? So we can use those data to actually answer what the pain points are. And then second point, so those user feedback may actually turn into tickets, into some feature that we can develop after we go through understanding the user needs and going through the design thinking process. So yeah.
All right. So moving on to our next question. This is from Miss Rachel Ann Carillo again. So the question is, how can a QA team ensure a balanced distribution of workload among members while implementing design thinking to improve their testing strategies?
Okay. Again, a difficult question to answer because it depends. It depends on the varying workload, on the varying situation that we have, which I'm sure is diverse. Depend because we have different teams, we have different background. Um, okay, so let me try to answer this in two ways. Referring to still sticking with value and my talk. So first, I think the whys involved in here is the why of the individual and the why of the team. So let's start with the team. So at first, if you committed into doing design thinking, so why? What is your why? If you've committed to your team doing design thinking, you also have to commit to the sacrifices in a way that will go with it. So it means as a team, as a team, you decide who will take what at which point in time. So maybe in the first part of your design thinking implementation, some team will just do it, and you've reached a milestone, and so the next milestone will be assigned to a different part of the team. That can be one strategy because you've committed to doing design thinking. So you're also, in a way, you have to make time as well into doing that experimentation. So that is for the team. And why as an individual? So why am I raising this as an individual? Because I'm sure in your team you're identifying the team strengths, each individual strengths, each individual's capabilities. So if maybe not detailed, but you have a profile of what each member can do or each member is lacking. So you know um, which of their strengths can you capitalize as you go through the design thinking process. Perhaps this person loves looking at data, so maybe you can ask that person to do questionnaires for the users. So as an individual, you can capitalize on their strengths to actually fulfill the need of the different design thinking phases.
Okay, so moving on to our next question. This is from Maria Reliza Pasang. So the question is, how do you handle time constraints when trying to implement design thinking practices in fast-paced QA cycles?
So maybe a bit of this has been answered earlier. So we do time box, we spend time dedicated to that, and maybe looking in the maybe bigger picture. Excuse me. So there are seasons of being busy and being not so busy. So if it's the worst case, we avoid those high-paced cycle if we want to actually do some improvement. And then um, if it's not high pace anymore, we start to devote time. And maybe I would also bring this up again because this is really a possible solution. So we treat those initiatives as QA technical debt and introduce them maybe 5%, 10% to the sprint. So because we know it will improve the way we do. So it in a way it's improving our general quality of our work. So it's justifiable to be included as a QA technical debt in the sprint. So those are the things that I can suggest to experiment.
All right, thank you, sir. So I think this is the last question that we can accommodate. So our time is almost up. So the last question would be from Miss Colleen Maris Alejandrino. So the question is, what do you suggest for ensuring the design meets user expectation to avoid potential challenges during QA?
My first thought on this is mm, to have that continuous feedback. That's why it's important to um, reaching to users in the first place. So once we have our prototype, we have ideated our prototype. We have to ask, is this what the users want? And for that to happen, we have to test. Um, so that is the maybe iterative way of making things right, of getting the actual feedback, actually receiving that this is the product that they imagine, this is the product that they need. And with that, we can iterate based from their feedback and provide a solution it, that is actually coming from the users. So yes, continuous and iterative feedback, I would say.
All right, I think that is it, sir. So, thank you once again, Mr. Richmond, for answering the questions now. I know you guys also have a lot of questions, so you may reach out to Sir Richmond via Airmit here in the chats if you have more questions or you want to discuss something with him. So, I'm afraid that's all the time that we have for this session. So, if you enjoyed the session, kindly give your rating and share your feedback. The link is in the chat box. So again, let's thank Mr. Richmond by clicking on the heart and clapping emoji. So I'm seeing that you're sending your hearts and claps. Thank you so much. So you may now exit this session and click on the next. Bye guys.